Hello again. Welcome to MustardHub Voices Behind the Build. In these fireside chat episodes, I sit down with the people building, backing, and running better workplaces. I'm your host, Curtis Forbes. My guest today is Daniel Altenburg. Daniel is the co-founder of Zipdev, a remote staffing company that helps U.S. and Canadian businesses scale with top talent from Latin America. Daniel's journey started in hospitality and recruiting, where he learned that business is built on relationships, not transactions. And over the past decade, Zipdev has been recognized on the Inc. 5000 and by Financial Times as one of the fastest growing companies in the Americas. At his core, Daniel is driven by connection, whether it's leading his team, serving entrepreneurs, or being present with his family. Daniel's passionate about growth in all areas of life, always reading, learning, and pushing himself outside of his comfort zone, probably with all of those surfboards and and snowboards. And he's my guest today on Voices Behind the Build. Thanks so much for being here, Daniel.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, the surfboards, snowboards, and skate. I got to stay cool for my little kids.
That's actually what I was just going to say, and I love that that you stay involved. So let's kind of jump in. More and more organizations are operating with distributed teams. I've been super excited about this conversation because it's something I talk about a lot. And I know that in the next 5 years, probably over 60, maybe closer to 70% of the whole US workforce, at least, and possibly, globally, is going to be involved in some capacity, even in the gig economy, right?
Mhm.
In some capacity, might not be full-time, might be part-time. But as the co-founder of Zipdev, you're kind of at the forefront of this big change in the world of work. You've had extensive experience when it comes to staffing and recruiting. How did you, end up in this world in the first place? What attracted you to staffing and recruiting?
Let's see here. Do you want the long story, the short story, the origin story? Yeah. So I'll start. I'll start here, and maybe we can kind of tie it together. But my mom was an HR generalist at the Marriott for like 24 years. She missed it by
Oh.
like a few years. We would have gotten some sort of discount as family members if she would have hit 25. But bless her heart, she worked there for like 24 years. But so when I got my first job at 16 out in Palm Desert at the JW Marriott, I got a job working in the cart barn, and I was cleaning golf carts, and then I would have the opportunity to clean golf clubs as people came off the course. And it was a very lucrative job, like a very good job for somebody who was 16, because I was making a lot of tips. And a lot of my friends in high school also wanted a job at the Marriott. And so I quickly learned at a young age how to filter my friends, because I didn't want to send my friends that were puffing on, the devil's lettuce to my mom, because then she'd be like, your friend so-and-so didn't pass a drug test. So I learned really quickly like how to vet and how to filter people before I sent them to my mom. And then fast forward to college, I went to San Diego State, and I learned quickly that if I was on associated students, that I would get priority registration. And so I took a role doing recruiting for the university. So I'd go to different high schools in the community, and I would talk to them about colleges. And because I did that, I got priority registration. So like all these things kind of happened. And then after college, I moved to Peru in 2008, and I got a job with a company called Universal Student Exchange. My idea of going to Peru was to perfect my Spanish. I had a lot of family there, so I thought I was going to go into this realm of immigration law. But I didn't want to spend all my days and nights reading. And I like to read for pleasure, but to read like 1,000 pages a week is a lot for anybody. And so I got this job with Universal Student Exchange, where I was recruiting university students and connecting them with clients in the US on a J1 visa. So the clients I worked with were ski resorts, Vail, Deer Valley, Mammoth. And so it was like a really cool opportunity. And I was selling this story of what it was like to live in the US as a college student when I just recently graduated. So I found a lot of success in that. And I quickly learned the power of, experience share, the power of a story. And so this whole idea of going down there and working with this J1 visas kind of became the backseat. And then I kind of fell into this role of recruiting and account managing. And so that's more or less where it started. During my time in Peru, I met my business partner, Michael, at an expat Thanksgiving. Him and I just hit it off. I mean, before when we started this conversation, we said, hey now brown cow, right? And so living in Latin America, not a lot of people pick up your one-liners from the movies
Yep.
we've watched as kids. And so when Mike and I were in this expat Thanksgiving room, I mentioned a couple one-liners. He laughed at it, and I was like, "Dude, you're my new best friend." Like we're gravitating, and so him and I became really tight in Peru. We played rugby together. He actually taught me the sport of rugby. And then we moved back to the US. He came back in 2012. I came back in 2013. I was working for a staffing agency doing, the full desk, selling, recruiting, account managing. And then on the side, Mike had asked if I could help him find if I could help him find a developer to build out a syllabus for his professional language learning business in Peru. I had the recruiter license, so I spoke to a handful of candidates. We huddled up a couple days later. I asked him what his budget was. He was running a business out of Peru, so he was looking to spend, 10 to 20 bucks an hour. Everybody I spoke with locally was looking for 150 to 200 bucks an hour. So that was like our aha moment of like, all right, what is everybody doing who doesn't necessarily have the buying power to compete with the Apples or Googles? We knew people weren't just building businesses, on their own. They had to have some sort of resources. And since we're here in San Diego, our proximity to Tijuana, 20 minutes
Yeah.
across the border. So, we missed the Latin lifestyle. We missed the food. So we started venturing into Tijuana for some tacos and attended some startup events. And then I wouldn't say we were surprised, right? But we were just shocked at the amount of fluent English speakers, college educated people who were just on the other side of the border that didn't have the opportunity to work with US customers because of the visa. And so that's where this whole idea of like, let's build a remote staffing agency to connect these people. That's where it all
I
came from.
love that. I love the story, by the way. I mean, it's literally
Thanks.
baked into your DNA from your like early childhood.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I've not many people really, I think, have that experience, at however old you were, 15, 16, or whatever, that's going to translate into their success in their 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s or whatever it happens to be. So the story is quite compelling. So now you have Zipdev, kind of given me a good idea of what sort of drove you and your co-founder, right, to
Mhm.
entrepreneurship in a way. Talk to us more about Zipdev, right? What the company does. Is it typically sourced from right across the border in Mexico? Is it Baja? Or do you have relationships with these folks when you go across the border, or is it all of Latin America?
Great question. So when we started the business, it was predominantly Tijuana. And there's a funny story there. So the Latin American culture is a beautiful culture, but we struggled when we first started because everybody thought that the jobs we had posted were like it was a scam, right? Because we didn't have an address, everything was remote, and they're like, "Well, I'm just going to send you my resume. Like, how do we even know these clients are real?" So our first year, we actually went into Tijuana and we got an office space. So we had like the big Zipdev logo on the office space. We had people coming in for interviews. And then we started actually attacking the universities and we hired a handful of interns. And so we did that for the first like year and a half. And so that gave us the street credit. And so that kind of ran its course after a couple years. And then our clients, everything was remote. And so we went from Tijuana and we started thinking, we're like, well, why don't we just open this up to like people in Mexico City? And we'll just give our clients a larger access of talent through Mexico City. So we opened up to Mexico City, found success there, and then it was like, well, why don't we open up to other cities in Mexico? And so we went into Guadalajara and into Monterrey, and then again, same thing happened. It was like, well, why are we stopping at Mexico? And so flash forward to today, we have team members in 16 different countries that we recruit from.
Oh,
Our recruiting team is distributed all through Latin America. And as long as you have, good internet, you speak fluent English, we'll represent you and get you connected with a client here in the U.S.
that's amazing. I mean, I can see there's obviously a huge need for those things. So tell me about the kinds of organizations that come to ZipDev. We don't have to name any names here, but I'm kind of curious about the kinds of organizations that you work with. Why are you the choice for their staffing needs versus another service, right?
Yeah.
Rather than like turning to Upwork or hiring directly.
Totally, great question. So we're not like a gig shop, right? I mean, there's definitely a place for some project work, right? You need something done, like a Shutterfly or a book or a website, right? You only need somebody for a handful of hours. That's fantastic, right? I recommend going to Upwork, go to Fiverr. But what we do is we're like a long term partner, and so we work with a handful of technology enabled companies. I mean, we obviously have a very diverse client portfolio, but people will come to us for a couple of reasons, right? The time zones is a huge thing, right? Everybody works on US time zones, and then their cultural alignment. So we really spend a lot of time understanding our clients' core values, their missions. I mean, everybody can say that, but what we really dig into is management styles, people's behaviors, and we try to identify the right long term fit. So that's kind of what's been helping us. COVID was a huge blessing in disguise, right? Prior to COVID, the world was not really open to this remote concept. And so that was like my biggest struggle, 2018, 2019, is I'd call clients, cold call them, and be like, hey, we've got all these awesome developers and team members in Latin America. Are you interested? And the feedback I get is like, I need them in house. I need to be able to have like a stand up meeting. If I need a whiteboard, like they need to be here. And so the market or the area that we really had a lot of success in was startups, right? Startups ran lean. They didn't have the buying power, right? They couldn't compete with buying an engineer or recruiting an engineer who was, getting an offer from Google or Apple, right? They didn't really have a lot. And a lot of these startups didn't want to give off, equity in their company. And so we had a lot of success with these startups. And then COVID hit, and as we all know, like the world kind of slowed down for a couple months, which is great. I just had my second kid. It was April. We're just kind of hanging out at home, really just trying to figure out what we're doing every day. And then, no joke, like June of 2020, like the phones just started ringing. Maybe not physical phones, but like, you know what I'm getting to say, like the phones, the emails just started going off, and everybody was like, "You got any more of those engineers?" It was kind of crazy. And so we went from, I think we had like 6 people on assignment, and then it doubled to 12, and then it went to like 18, then to 20, and then to 25. And it was just this crazy growth, and everybody needed all these people. And we just had this database. And so we were kind of just set up for success. And, timing is everything. And it just hasn't really slowed down since then. And so now, it's 2025, everybody's remote. We're doing this remote. We're not even in the same room. And so it's just become this kind of normal concept that we all are dealing with, which I think is killer, right? A lot more time on my hands. I have the freedom to, pick my kids up from school. My team members are people that we work with. They spend more
Yeah.
time with their family, with their aging parents, right? Not spending time in traffic. So it's a win-win for everybody.
So, I mean, working with remote talent on a schedule that I think syncs up with your own is probably pretty appealing to most leaders. You had mentioned that the time zone thing is, really important to a lot of folks, which I fully get and understand. So, since you focus on connecting organizations with talent in Latin America, I'm assuming most of your clients are based here in the Americas. Is it U.S. and Canada only?
Yeah, we have a handful of Canadian clients, but the majority are here in the US.
U.S. based, yeah.
Yeah, y'all US
So,
based.
what kind of roles are these organizations looking to fill with Zipdev? Are there certain positions that are better suited for remote hiring, or certain roles that are not good for remote workers?
I mean, pretty much anything can be done remote. Obviously the food industry, hospitality industry, a lot of those positions like front of the house need to be in person. But we are starting to see a lot of like self check-in, right? All this contactless stuff happening. Um, so the majority of our personnel, I would say about 80% of the people we have on assignment are technical people, right? So software
Okay.
engineers, QA, DevOps, mobile, front end, back end, you name it. And then the other 20% are non-tech. So we have marketing assistants, we have financial analysts, virtual assistants, customer service reps, biz dev, lead generators. So it really just depends on what the client's needs are. And it also really kind of goes back to where they're located, right? I mean, I'm here in California, it's expensive to hire people. right? You think about New York, you think about some of these other emerging cities, like it gets very expensive to hire people. And I'm not saying, take all your domestic employees and send them offshore. Not by any means. But it's an opportunity to help alleviate some of that workload, right? And so you can keep your, controllers on assignment and then bring on an entry level finance person to take off some of their low hanging fruit, right? That really helps with retention. That really helps with their, life work balance. I don't know that hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So, I'm actually going to take a small shift here. We're all about culture here at Mustard Hub, and it can
Love
be
that.
challenging for a lot of leaders, I think, to create and sort of nurture culture. A big part of a healthy workplace culture, right, is having team members feel seen,
Yeah.
feel appreciated, right, feel heard. Um, even participate in those water cooler moments. Obviously, so much, and so many teams these days are not in person, so it's hard to have those same kind of meaningful moments within the organization. Obviously, don't need to say Mustard Hub here, but I'm curious if you have any thoughts on how leaders can do that for remote workers. So you obviously talk to organizations that are looking to hire team members. You talk about being a long-term partner, which to me indicates, right, we're hoping that this hire will work with this team for a long time. And in order for that
Yeah.
to happen, right, there has to be a really good and really healthy workplace culture. So what do you tell these business leaders?
That is like my greatest challenge, and that's to build a cool company culture in a remote environment. I don't know if I've necessarily figured that out yet. Um, but what sparked this whole concept of like really having a cool company is I worked for Taylor Guitars for a couple years. I was their corporate recruiter. And man, I have never ever seen anything like that place. Like the people that worked there, we were celebrating 20, 25-year anniversaries. The people who lived and breathed the company, they were all guitar players. Like it was just, they were craftsmen. Like everybody loved it. And I've never had a sense of belonging like I've done there. And so when I started Zipdev, or when I left Taylor Guitars to go full time Zipdev, like that's what I wanted to create, something like that. And so, yeah, no, there's no denying it's a challenge, right? But people really love those touch points that you can offer them. So some of the things that we've done at Zipdev, we do what we call Turn It Up Thursdays. So we have a Spotify playlist that we wipe clean every Thursday morning, and then on Slack we'll put it to a vote, and then the whole company. So we have about 200 people on assignment, and we have about 15 people on our internal team, and so we put it to a vote as to what people want to listen to. And so sometimes it's like a genre, sometimes it's a theme. So like this week it's all spooky songs, and everybody gets to like add their own version of whatever the theme is to that playlist. And so we've been doing that now for 3 years. And to be honest, like my music playlist has never been cooler ever before, because you get like heavy metal from, Mexico and Argentina, and then you get like cumbia and salsa from some of the Caribbean countries. So it's awesome, right? And you get to connect, you get to learn a little bit more about people, right? You get to learn who's like the big, metalhead in the company, right? Who's into like, Spanish R&B, who's into pop, right? And so you get to learn these little things about people outside of like the surveys that we submit. Another thing we do is I lead a book club. It's voluntary, so we pick a book, typically a business book, and then we read a chapter, and then a group of us discuss it every Friday at 10:30. And so we spend about 30 minutes discussing the chapter, what we've learned about it, and it's also given us the opportunity to have people open up and get vulnerable. Right? I think we just
Mm.
spoke. We just read. We're currently reading a book, Originals, but we just read the book Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. And usually, I try to foster some sort of like vulnerability in it, right? Because in a remote environment, like high trust and getting vulnerable will allow you to connect pretty quickly, right? Much better than you can in an office setting. And well, not much better, but it helps since we're not in an office setting. And then we also do like lunch and learns. So the lunch and learns is same thing. It's voluntary. It's one Thursday every month. I think a few months back we had a girl from Colombia. She did a lunch and learn on candle making. And
Oh,
then the
wow.
following month, it was followed up by somebody in Argentina who did something on DevOps, right? And so it's just
So,
all over the place. But these are just cool little like touch points that you can get with people to really like see who they are authentically
yeah.
and let them, be their authentic selves. And I think that's really what the culture piece is about.
This is really interesting kind of direction that you took that because I'm curious now. So, so Zipdev is basically an EOR, right? And are are the employer of record for 200 or so on assignment?
Correct. So we're the agency of record. So
Agency.
we're not the
Okay.
EOR. So we're the agency of record, which allows us to keep our costs down. And then we
Okay.
give everybody the full time experience. So everyone gets, their medical benefits, their
Understood.
active
Okay.
lifestyle benefits, and things like that. Yeah.
And so you do engagement practices for the hundreds that you work with or that work on assignment with ZipDev, including your internal team. Curious if you've seen what leaders do with those that they have on assignment for them to keep those individuals really connected to those teams. Have you seen any kind of
Yeah, the really good leaders, the companies that we have a lot of success with, is they treat them just like their own employees, right? Typically, if you've ever been in a work setting, there's always like this talk of like, oh, those are the contractors, right? Like those are the contractors. It's kind of like this like weird thing, but in the companies that we work with, the ones that find a lot of success and have high retention, like they're treated just as normal employees, right? And so, yes, we might be the agency of record, but once they get, integrated into that company handles their day-to-day operations. And then essentially we just turn into an HR provide like an HR extension. So we're conducting one-on-ones, we're fielding PTO requests, we're getting devices out to them, we're setting them up for continuous learning programs. And so yeah, so I guess the answer is like you got to treat these people as just like, a normal employee of your company.
yeah. Do
Because they're
you
building
find that
stuff for your company too. They're helping, they're building, they're sweating, they're stressing, right? Like,
yeah. Yeah, do you find that folks that when they come to ZipDev are just hiring some I guess how do I ask this question? Are they essentially looking to outsource an entire team or just some individuals to help augment what they're already doing? Or maybe you have both. You have folks who have an entire team that's been outsourced to ZipDev, and maybe you have some where it's just simply certain individuals to augment a team.
yeah, it's a little bit of both. So, an example is we have a couple tech companies that we work with. And so, the majority of their engineering team is here in the States. And then they've scaled up with, three, four, five people to do DevOps and QA, right? And so they all work hand in hand. And then we work with a couple other clients who have, they have their account executives, on the grounds here in the US, going to networking events, selling, and then they're just throwing deal flow over to their biz dev reps located in Latin America to handle the contracts, get those
Hmm.
negotiated, get those executed, right? So it's a little bit of both. And then we also have other companies who've just 100% their entire, engineering team is distributed through Latin America. But then they have like their sales reps or their product owners, different roles in the US.
In the US, yeah.
Mhm.
How does a leader measure engagement with a remote team? Is that something you've
Uh,
measured or that you personally have seen measured in particular ways that you feel like work well?
I can't speak for other companies as to how they manage engagement. We do conduct monthly one-on-ones with our assigned team members just to kind of keep a pulse on how things are going, right? Workload, stress levels, bandwidth, communication styles, right? Just to kind of ensure like they're happy doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
If there's ever anything that pops up, if it dips, if they say, morale it goes from a 9 to a 7, right? That might be a reason for our talent success team to reach out to them and then kind of pry a little bit, dig a little bit. And if there's something there that, we're not really sure about, we'll broach that subject with the client. Right.
Have
But
you
I
ever
think,
had Sorry, go
what's that?
ahead. Go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
was going to say, I think the engagement piece just speaks on retention. Right. And so
Yeah.
on average, our team members stick around for like 27 months. right? And so
Wow,
that
that's
itself speaks a
impressive.
lot. Yeah, and everyone's always like, "Why?" I'm like, it's a lot of reasons why. For one, they're getting the taste of the American dream from the comforts of their own home, right? The remote
Wow.
work is awesome. I mean, I don't know if you've ever traveled to like Mexico City or Sao Paulo, Brazil, but like traffic is insane. So you get to work remote, so you're not spending all this time, and then you obviously get to find, your paycheck is a little bit more than what you would find domestic, like locally for them,
Yeah.
right? So it's
Yeah.
like a win-win for everybody.
Do you ever have, team members or those that are all working on assignment for you? You ever have them come to you with some, concerns or complaints that they're not feeling challenged or engaged by the teams that they're working with or for?
Oh, 100%. I mean, we're in the business of people. So the one thing you know about people is they're not constant, right? People want to be challenged. People want to continue to grow and learn. Doesn't mean that there aren't people who are just individual contributors who are happy just doing the same thing over and over again. In which there's always a spot for them. But if somebody isn't feeling challenged, like that's the moment in our one-on-ones where they can kind of raise their hand. So we also do another thing we do is what we call the continuous learning bonus program. And so it's twice a year. And so what happens is the team member on assignment will do an evaluation of themselves, like their skill sets and what they're really good at. And then they do an evaluation of kind of like the industry they're in. So if you're a software engineer, you would probably do an evaluation on your JavaScript skills, your Python, whatever. And then you would do kind of an evaluation on like where the industry is going. Like, oh, there's this new product being launched or this new version of React coming out. And then what they'll do is they'll sit down with their manager at the company and then they'll look at both of those things and then they'll come up with like plan of what they want the team member to learn in the next like 6 to 12 months. And so let's just say
Mm,
a client knows they're rolling out like a new app with a different kind of tech stack, then they will let us know and then we have access to a ton of different learning platforms and so we'll put the team member on a continuous learning program and it's all activity based, so it's like kind of gamified. So if you read a book you get a point, if you do a practice project it's like 5 points, if you get a certification it's five, and so each team member has to hit 15 activity points within a 6 month period, and if they do that then we cut them a check for a bonus, right? And
that's
so
amazing.
now, yeah, so one, now they're being challenged, right? They're learning something new. Two, they're sharpening their skill sets, becoming much more valuable for the client, and then three, it's like a retention piece on our end.
Yeah. They're also becoming more valuable for you too.
Totally.
Um, so, I mean, it actually brings me to a really good, I think, good question, a good topic. I mean, as we think about the world of work today, and then also in the near future, what do you think is going to be important for tomorrow's workers? And I know that's a loaded question, right? Because we have AI to think about. We have a lot of this new technology that can augment people's work, right? Can make
Yeah.
people more efficient, can also replace some people's work. So I'm curious how you see that.
I've been to a ton of conferences over the last like 2 months, right? Obviously, AI is like the biggest buzzword. I actually just wrote a blog about my experience at HR Tech and the big buzzword. This was like back in what are we October? This was back in early September, and like the big buzzword was agentic AI. Right? Agentic AI. Everybody's talking about agentic AI, and then the other one was an onboarding orchestration specialist. And so one of the topics was like, oh, AI is going to take our jobs, and a couple of these keynote speakers had mentioned, like, with every single revolution that we've had, yes, jobs go away, but new jobs are created. And I'm very confident that new jobs will be created. And so, for example, that onboarding orchestration specialist that they talked about, like, I'd never heard about that, but it totally makes sense. It's somebody who's going to onboard these agents and ensure that they're doing the correct process for their job. And so I think the future is going to be where AI is going to make us much more efficient, but you're also going to have, human colleagues and probably also some like AI agents that you're working with too. Um, yeah.
That's interesting. What about leaders? I mean, in the near future, any other skills you think leaders are going to need to have in order to create more engaged workforce? Are there certain tools that need to be, they need to be successful for building and retaining these satisfied teams?
I think leaders. I mean, I can only speak for myself. So what I think people are our biggest asset, right? I think that there's no way I could eliminate the human touch out of my business. I'm in staffing, right? Like, yes, I
Yeah.
could have a bot that would do, the application. I could have an agent do, the sourcing call, but like that just, I don't know, call me old school, but that just seems kind of weird to me that I wouldn't have the opportunity to talk to someone and get a vibe. I think, you know, I think what people want is to just be their authentic self. And as mentioned, like we do some of these culture things and it gives the people to just show up and be who they are, right? Share who they are. And I think that's the piece. So I think, as a leader myself, I definitely want to, yeah, I definitely want people to, be who they want to be their authentic self, work, have a good life, have a good
Yeah.
living, use some tools to make your job as efficient as possible. If you can use some tools and you're only working 30, 32 hours a week, it's go for it. That's awesome.
I,
Like,
I like that. Yep. I think that sometimes I fit in that camp.
totally.
Um, curious aspects of people dynamics you think that are going to change as the business landscape evolves and there's more work that goes remote, right? We've
Yeah.
already talked about the fact that, like, you know, there's so many benefits, right, to working remotely, and but it does introduce, a change in people dynamics, right, within organizations, right? How do you see that changing, right? I guess at the way beginning we mentioned that so much of the workplace is going to go in that direction. Any big predictions for what you see?
I have been seeing a lot more things become like a hybrid model, right? I think like a lot of companies are shifting back to this hybrid model, which I think is great, right? I love interacting with people, right? I mean, my business is fully remote, but I love going to conferences. I love networking. I love sitting in a room and hearing some thought leaders talk about cool things and gets my brain going, and I can turn to my left and talk to someone and get their aspect of it. So I think that as the world continues to be flat, right, and become borderless, I think that we just need to give people the opportunity to connect a little bit more on whether that's like through a lunch and learn, whether that's through like a
Yeah.
virtual coffee, whether that's like taking them to retreats, right? I still think that human piece is still very much needed.
How do you see your own work evolving in line with this? Probably getting
My
a little
own
busier, I would think.
yeah, my world is getting busier. I'm currently sitting in the growth seat. So as mentioned, I'm a recruiter by trade. So I was overseeing recruiting and customer success and account management for the longest time, and I just moved into the sales and marketing seat. Um, and I think a lot of my background in recruiting, just asking questions, getting to know people, really helps in the world of sales. I think that my role will be changing because there's just a lot more tools. But also too, that's like another confusing part is there's so many different tools that come out like every week that it's hard to really keep up to date with everything. And so, um, yeah, my only recommendation is like get somebody who's really good at ops and who's really interested in emerging tech.
Yeah. I always kind of like to end on this question, this thought. If you have a if a business leader comes to you, an entrepreneur, or you mentioned obviously you work with a lot of startups. So whether it's an entrepreneur, or some sort of business leader asking for some really, strong advice, maybe the most important piece of advice you can give them about managing people well, especially those in a remote workforce, right? Taking
Hmm.
care of them, building that team, right? If you only had a minute, you're on an elevator up to the top floor, and before the door opens and they walk out, what is that one thing that you tell them?
Um, let's
You're
see
on the spot.
here. Yeah, no, this is great. Let's see here. Real quickly. So yeah, we do service startups. We've moved into more like medium-sized businesses over the last few
Okay.
years because the COVID thing. When I talk to people, um, I was actually having a call I had a call this morning with one of my sales reps, and we were just kind of just chit-chatting. And he's been with our company for about a year plus. And I was telling him that a lot, like we were going through some of the emails. He CCs me on some of the emails, and I'm like, man, like I love that you're doing the follow up, but a lot of the stuff is like I can tell it's like Chat GPT or AI generated, right? It just seems so vanilla. And I think in this space that we're in right now with like there's so much content coming at us, right? There's so much information. Like I'm getting pinged on LinkedIn, and like to be honest, like everything sounds the same. Whether it's like, hey, I didn't you must be busy or your inbox is full, and it's like the M dashes, right? And you can just tell like what is just like a bot. And so I think the biggest thing right now is like really, really trying to figure out how to portray your voice and your authenticity in some of these like 30-second window
Yeah.
grabs,
Yeah.
right? And so, and I'm trying to figure that out now. And I'm not saying to like go and write a follow up email with a cuss word in it by any means, unless you have that rapport with someone. But that's like the biggest thing is like how does one like really highlight their authentic personal self in like this 30-second elevator pitch? Right. And then the second part is, I've been doing this now for a very long time. I'm 41. I'm not really trying to give anyone an elevator pitch anymore. If I'm at a conference, like I'm just trying to become a friend with someone more first than anything. And I guess it's like, any of the sales books would say like you're selling yourself, right? But that's what it is. Like I'm not out here being like, "Hey, tell me about your hiring problems." "Oh, hey, how many people have you hired?" Like that just kind of comes off way too silly, but it's like if I'm at a conference, I'm going to be like, "What do you think about that guy's perspective on agentic AI and where this is moving?" And then, through those discussions and conversations, oh, what and then it's like, 20 minutes into it, you're like, "What do you even do?" Like, "Oh, I run this type of business." Like, "Oh, cool. What do you do?" Like, "Oh, I run a remote staffing agency." It's like, "Oh, dude, I'm actually looking for someone in this position." And that's kind of where like the magic happens.
Yeah.
Right. And so that would be my 2 cents of advice is just be yourself. People want to do business with people that they like. And in the world we're in now where there's just so much content and so much just stuff being thrown at you and everyone's just hitting you up with the same messaging, like just set yourself
You
apart, just
know,
be your
I
authentic self.
I have to say Chat GPT really ruined it for me, and my creative use of the M dash, I had to quickly
Remove
nix
it.
that from
Yeah.
my, from my
Yeah,
writings.
totally. You see that, and it's just an automatic like next, And so again, it's like
Yeah.
how do you have like that small little window to show who you are, right?
Yeah.
And again, it might just be like taking the extra step to research and be like, oh, you live in Toronto, cool, go Blue Jays. I'm here in San Diego, so obviously, we root for the Padres.
Well well, Daniel, thank you so much for joining me, man. I really appreciate it. It's been great sitting down to chat with you.
No, likewise, Curtis. I appreciate your time. Thanks for asking the questions that you did, and wish you guys nothing but success.
Yeah, same. Thanks all for tuning in to Mustard Hub Voices Behind the Build. Please like and share this episode. Drop by mustardhub.com to learn how we can help companies become destinations for workplace happiness and turn culture into a competitive edge. And be sure to sign up to be one of the first to get started with Mustard Hub for free when you visit. Until next time.